I just need space. Lisa's words landed like a rogue snowball in July, chilling me to the core. We were in our Brooklyn Heights apartment amidst the usual Sunday morning chaos. Coffee brewing, city sounds filtering in, the low hum of our lives. Arguing, sort of. About her sister's wedding, nothing catastrophic. I'd braced for the usual back and forth, the eventual truce, maybe even a makeup brunch in the West Village. But her tone, that was a whole different burrow. Detached, icy, like she was ordering a latte, not dismantling our marriage. Not anger, not annoyance, just departure. Space? I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth, like a phrase from a self-help book I'd never read, hoping for a rewind, a laugh. Just kidding. I need space from your snoring. Instead, arms crossed, sharp exhale, eyes fixed on the Manhattan skyline. Anywhere but me. Yeah, space, David. Time to think. Time to figure things out. Surreal. Lisa. My Lisa. The woman who'd braved rush hour on the L train just to surprise me at work. Now she needed to escape me? My brain scrambled for logic, for an explanation less apocalyptic. What kind of space? Temporary? Like a weekend upstate? Could I fix this? Was there a fix? Her answers were clipped, robotic, delivered with the warmth of a subway platform in January. It's not about you, she stated flatly. It's me. I need this. Argue? What was the point? Her mind was a steel vault in Wall Street. The casual flick of her hand dismissal stung more than any shouting match. This wasn't a cry for help. It was a carefully crafted exit strategy, months in the making, delivered like a parking ticket. I retreated, not in anger, but in self-preservation. My head was Grand Central Station at rush hour, a chaotic swirl of confusion and dread. It wasn't the word space itself. It was the chilling certainty that this was the blaring siren of a slow, silent shipwreck. Later, we moved through our apartment like strangers sharing a cramped elevator. Her words echoed in the silence, each syllable a hammer blow. We had issues, sure, every couple in New York did. But distance? From me? What had I missed? What had I become, or failed to become, to make myself the thing she needed to run from? Looking back, the warning signs were flashing neon, brighter than Times Square at midnight. The gradual fade of connection. The way conversations became monologues, her world shrinking to a solitary island, no longer us. She wasn't happy. Hadn't been for a long, long time. I'd been too busy navigating the city, the job, life, to see the iceberg dead ahead. Sleep was a luxury that night. Every fight, every compromise, every sacrifice replayed in my mind's 3D cinema. I'd swallowed my own ambitions, prioritized hers, thinking, good husband, good partner. Now, here we were, at a crossroads in the middle of nowhere, directionless. Morning dawned, gray and gritty like a Staten Island ferry terminal on a rainy day. "Are you sure?" I asked, voice hoarse, clinging to a thread of hope thinner than a strand of her hair. "Can we talk? Work through this? Just time," she repeated, the phrase now a weapon, sharp and cold, like it was a traffic jam, easily rerouted. But this was a dead end. Years invested, a life intertwined, wasn't that worth more than a casual dismissal? Then it crashed over me, a wave of realization as cold as the East River in winter. She wasn't asking for space. She was delivering a verdict. It was over. Done trying. Her actions, the glacial tone, the averted gaze, they screamed louder than any shouted, "I'm done," she couldn't quite bring herself to say. The questions died on my lips, choked by the weight of the unspoken. If space was her decree, space she would get, but not on her terms. This wouldn't be a retreat. It would be a revolution. After that icy exchange, silence descended on our apartment, thick and suffocating, heavier than the city's polluted air. She moved through our shared space like a ghost haunting her former life, avoiding me as if I was a mugger on a dark street. And I let her. What more could be said? Each time I considered reaching out, a hand on her arm, a whispered, "Please, let's talk." I stopped myself. Pointless. Her decision was final, sealed tighter than a vault in Fort Knox. So I turned inward. My thoughts, my only companions, were harsh critics, dissecting every moment, every misstep, every unspoken word. I started sifting through the wreckage of our years, searching for the precise point of impact, the moment the foundation crumbled. Then it struck me, a revelation as stark as the city skyline at night. The cracks weren't hidden. They were painted across the walls, plastered on billboards, obvious as the yellow cabs clogging Broadway. I'd just chosen to look away, to ignore the tremors, to pretend the foundation was solid when it was crumbling beneath our feet. Early marriage flickered in my mind, a rapid montage of devotion and sacrifice. Her dreams became my blueprints, my career path rerouted to fit her ambitions. Hours spent listening, supporting, bolstering, always the unwavering foundation she needed. Or so I thought. When money was tight, stress levels sky high, I carried the burden, silently, stoically, the good provider, the dependable partner. But as I pieced together the fractured mosaic of us, a bitter truth emerged, sharp as a shard of glass from a broken bodega window. She'd taken it all for granted, every sacrifice, every compromise, every bending of myself to her will. Each time I prioritized her, it wasn't appreciated. It was expected, absorbed, treated as her rightful due. Had she ever considered my dreams, my aspirations? Had she ever sacrificed anything truly meaningful for me? The answer echoed in the hollow silence of our apartment. No. A resounding, deafening no. Vacations canceled at her whim. Hobbies abandoned because they didn't align with her vision of our life. Plans rearranged on a moment's notice to accommodate her needs. Each memory, a lead weight dragging me down, a stark reminder of the staggering cost of peace, of us, and the return on my investment. Indifference, distance, a wife who now craved space because my very presence had become unbearable. It was like waking up in Times Square after the New Year's Eve ball dropped, the confetti swept away, the crowds gone, leaving behind a cold, empty reality. I'd believed in us, in team, in temporary setbacks on a shared journey to forever. Now the journey was over, the road vanished, and I was stranded, alone in the wreckage. Anger surged, hot and fierce, not just at her, but at my own naivete, my own blindness. How had I allowed this to happen? How had I shrunk myself so small, so insignificant in my own life. I'd once been ambitious, driven, fueled by goals that were mine, not mere reflections of hers. Over the years, I'd systematically erased pieces of myself, convinced that self-immolation was the price of love, of commitment. Our relationship, stripped of its romantic veneer, was brutally one-sided. I'd bent over backwards, contorted myself into a pretzel of accommodation. She drifted further and further away, cocooning herself in a world of me, prioritizing her own desires at every turn. The bitterness wasn't just directed at her. It was a searing indictment of my own weakness, my own complicity in this disastrous imbalance. Sitting there surrounded by the ghosts of us, one stark truth became blindingly clear, clearer than the midday sun reflecting off the Chrysler Building. If she needed space, maybe, just maybe, it was because she'd already taken too much of mine. Time to reclaim it, to carve out my own territory again, even if it meant severing ties, letting her go adrift in her own self-centered universe. How to do it? The path was shrouded in fog, as murky as the Hudson on a winter morning. But one thing resonated with absolute certainty: the endless sacrifices, the constant giving, the erosion of myself. That was over. For the first time in years, a flicker of clarity ignited, a tiny spark of self-respect in the desolate landscape of my heart. I couldn't change her mind. That wasn't my role. Never had been. Never should have been. Keep chasing after someone who was already halfway out the door. Keep pouring my lifeblood into a relationship that had become a hollow, echoing shell. No, that wasn't my story anymore. My narrative was about to take a sharp, unexpected turn. The first step, a quiet, resolute decision, made in the hushed stillness of my Brooklyn apartment. Done. Done trying to fix things for her. Done shouldering the blame. Done being the sole architect of us. If she craved space, she'd get it. In spades. But on my terms, not hers. For years, I'd been the bridge builder, the peacekeeper, the tireless engine propelling us forward. That thankless job was officially vacant. She wanted time to think? Fine. I'd use this time to reclaim my life piece by painful piece. Small, deliberate choices became my weapons of self-reconstruction. Conversations. I stopped initiating them. Silence. Once the suffocating enemy, now my shield, my sanctuary. Heavy, awkward at first, a physical weight pressing down on the apartment. But I refused to break, refused to fill the void with forced pleasantries or desperate pleas. If she wouldn't talk, neither would I. For the first time in years, she tasted the bitter flavor of the distance she'd been so meticulously cultivating, dismantling us, brick by agonizing brick, finances first, joint accounts severed, my name surgically removed from everything shared. Financial independence, a newly declared territory, not cruel, just necessary. Enough of my hard-earned money fueling her whims, her desires, while mine languished, unspent, unappreciated. That chapter decisively closed, reclaiming the apartment. Our space. But looking around with fresh eyes, it was overwhelmingly, oppressively hers. Every decorative knick-knack, every strategically placed throw pillow, every framed photo, a shrine to Lisa, Lisa, Lisa. Her books, her art, her touches, boxed up, disappearing into the ether of storage. Not out of spite, not from bitterness, but from a deep, primal need to breathe, to inhabit a space that reflected me, not just her. Making this apartment mine again, my sanctuary, my starting point. Emotionally, the most challenging shift. Letting go of the ingrained caretaking instinct. Years of reflexively prioritizing her needs, her moods, her anxieties. Upset? I'd probe, inquire, offer solutions. Overwhelmed? I'd swoop in, rescue her in shining armor. Now, the dramatic sighs, the pointed silences, the carefully constructed air of exhaustion, met with nothing. Silence. Let her stew in her own drama. Not unkindness, but a conscious, deliberate unlearning of a role I'd played for far too long, a role that had nearly extinguished me. The first tremor of her awareness. Why are you acting like this? Voice sharp, laced with irritation, the entitlement barely veiled. I met her gaze, unflinching. Respecting your request, Lisa. You said you needed space. I'm giving it to you. A blink, caught off guard. The sheer simplicity of the answer seemed to disarm her. No arguing, no pleading, no desperate attempts to fix things. Just done. Her reaction, a stark revelation. Confused, yes. Maybe even angry. Had she actually expected me to take her space request seriously? Had she envisioned me chasing after her, begging her to reconsider? No explanation owed beyond the plain, unvarnished truth. Space demanded, space delivered, the entire desolate expanse of it. Each day, a little stronger, a little more myself. Each deliberate decision, a reclaimed piece of my stolen identity. Sacrifices, once proudly worn badges of honor, now felt like heavy, self-imposed shackles. Learning to breathe again, to stand upright, to exist outside the suffocating orbit of us. Not punishment, not revenge, not even really about saving myself, though that was a welcome side effect. It was about something far more fundamental, far more essential. Reclaiming the respect I'd willingly surrendered somewhere between I do and I just need space. By the time the tectonic plates of our relationship shifted visibly, audibly, in a way even Lisa couldn't ignore, it was irrevocably too late. I wasn't the same David she'd taken for granted, the reliable doormat she'd walked all over for years. I wasn't waiting for her approval, her validation, her fleeting moments of attention. My focus was laser sharp, singular, moving forward, unburdened, unencumbered, finally free from the anchor of us dragging me down. Indifference at first. The seismic changes in our apartment, in our dynamic, seemed to register as mere background noise, irrelevant static. Detached attitude, averted conversations, same routine of separate lives lived under the same roof. But then, the joint account. One evening, phone clutched in her hand, face a mask of thunderous disbelief. Why can't I access the account? Voice sharp, incredulous, bordering on accusatory. Didn't look up from the book I was pretending to read. Separated our finances, I said calmly, evenly. You wanted space, seemed clearer this way. Confusion morphed into incandescent anger. "You can't just cut me off like that. We're married, David. This is our money." Book down, spine creased, marker lost, met her furious glare head on. "Hasn't felt like our anything for a long time, Lisa. You made it abundantly clear you wanted space. I'm just obliging." Jaw clenched, muscles in her neck taut. For a heartbeat, I thought she might explode, launch into a tirade of accusations and demands. Instead, she spun on her heel, a whirlwind of fury, and stormed out of the living room, the bedroom door slamming shut with the force of a gunshot. Not the end, not by a long shot, but a definite, undeniable, and utterly irreversible beginning. Days bled into weeks, a slow, grinding attrition of our already fractured connection. The confrontations escalated, sharp, brutal, fueled by her escalating sense of outrage. Accusations of coldness, of vindictiveness, of punishing her for simply asking for what she needed. "You're acting like I'm the enemy, David," she spat one night, arms crossed tight across her chest, a defensive barrier against the unfamiliar unyielding me. Shook my head, slowly, deliberately. "Not punishing you, Lisa. Just respecting your wishes. You wanted distance. I'm stepping back, that's all." Her frustration mounted, a pressure cooker about to explode. She was utterly unprepared for this version of me, the one who didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't bend to her emotional storms. For years, I'd been the designated de-escalator, the bridge builder, the human buffer smoothing over every rough edge, every tense moment. Now, I let the tension simmer, let it boil over, let it consume us both. If she was uncomfortable, if she was unraveling, that was, for the first time in our marriage, entirely her problem to solve. The arguments came in waves, each one more intense, more corrosive than the last. "You can't just erase me like this, David," she shrieked during one particularly volatile exchange, her voice echoing off the exposed brick walls of our increasingly hostile apartment. "This is still my home, too." Stayed calm, outwardly at least, though my patience was fraying at the edges, thin as old wallpaper. "No one's erasing you, Lisa. But if you don't want to be a part of this marriage, then I'm not going to keep living like I'm the only one holding it together, like I'm the only one who cares." The words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. They seemed to sting, to finally penetrate the wall of self-absorption she'd erected around herself. For a fleeting moment she looked uncertain, vulnerable, almost like the Lisa I'd fallen in love with a lifetime ago. But then the vulnerability flickered, replaced by a familiar hardening. She turned abruptly, retreating to the bedroom, the door slamming behind her. A final, resounding punctuation mark to yet another unresolved and increasingly pointless fight. It was surreal, watching her react with such fury, such outrage, to the very thing she'd initiated. She'd claimed she needed space, craved distance, yet when I actually created boundaries, financial, emotional, physical, she reacted as if I'd committed some unspeakable betrayal. It was as if she hadn't truly considered what space meant, what it would actually look like when I stopped being the ever-compliant, ever-giving man she'd molded me into. As the days bled into weeks, the raw anger began to recede, replaced by a quieter, more insidious discomfort. The shouting matches became less frequent, the explosive confrontations replaced by a tense, brittle silence. She started watching me more closely, her eyes narrowed, assessing, probing, as if trying to decipher the code to this new, unfamiliar David, the stranger who had somehow taken up residence in her life, in her apartment, in her marriage. I could see her struggling to process the seismic shift in our dynamic, to adjust to a version of me she simply didn't recognize, didn't understand, and perhaps deep down didn't want. One night, a different tactic, a softer approach, a carefully constructed vulnerability. "I never wanted it to come to this, David," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, almost pleading. I just needed some time to figure things out. I didn't think you'd shut me out completely." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. And for the first time in just as long, I didn't feel the familiar reflexive urge to fix things, to smooth things over, to offer reassurance. That instinct, that ingrained response, had finally, blessedly, died. "I'm not shutting you out, Lisa," I said, my voice even, measured, devoid of emotion. "I'm just done giving more than I get." She looked tired, defeated, the fight finally draining out of her. But I didn't offer comfort, didn't reach out, didn't soften my gaze. That wasn't my role anymore. This wasn't an ending, not in the traditional sense. It was a transition, a painful, necessary shift, and I was, finally, ready to embrace it, to walk through the fire and emerge, changed, on the other side. Every small action, every deliberate choice felt like reclaiming a stolen piece of myself, a slow, painstaking process of self-excavation. The apartment, once a suffocatingly shared space, became my primary focus, my battleground for self-reclamation. I started with the physical clutter, the tangible manifestations of her pervasive presence, the things that screamed of Lisa at every turn, her carefully curated decorations, the framed photos she'd insisted on hanging in every room, even the strategically placed throw pillows she'd bought to brighten up the space. One by one, they went into boxes, sealed shut, banished from my sight. I didn't ask for her permission, didn't seek her approval. I didn't need to. If these objects held any sentimental value for her, if she wanted them in her new, separate life, she could claim them, pack them, and take them with her when she finally, irrevocably left. The process wasn't without resistance, wasn't without friction. One afternoon, she walked in on me in the midst of my purging, packing away a set of gaudy, decorative trinkets she'd inexplicably brought home from some weekend flea market years ago. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp, laced with immediate accusation. "Clearing out the things I don't need anymore," I replied calmly, deliberately, without even bothering to look up from my task. Her face hardened, her eyes narrowing to slits. "This is still my home too, David. You can't just throw everything away." I paused, straightened up, finally meeting her furious gaze. "I'm not throwing anything away, Lisa. If it's important to you, if you actually want it, take it. But I'm done living in a space that doesn't feel like mine. Done living in a museum of your life." She didn't respond, couldn't articulate a coherent argument against the stark, undeniable truth of my words. Instead, she simply turned and left, slamming the door behind her with a force that rattled the windows of our Brooklyn Heights apartment. But this time, I didn't flinch, didn't jump, didn't even register a flicker of reaction. The anger in her reaction, the simmering rage beneath the surface, it wasn't my problem anymore. With each box I sealed, each object I purged, I felt lighter, freer, as if shedding layers of dead skin, emerging into a brighter, cleaner, more authentic version of myself. It wasn't just about removing physical objects. It was about exorcising the weight they carried, the symbolic burden of a life I'd worked so tirelessly to build, a life that, in the harsh light of reality, didn't truly reflect who I was, who I wanted to be. Stripping it down to its bare bones, to its essential core, felt like a radical act of self-preservation, like starting over not just in the apartment but in my own fragmented, long-neglected identity. Emotionally, the changes were slower, more insidious, harder to navigate. I'd spent so many years, so many months, so many days, inextricably wrapped up in her moods, her needs, her problems, her anxieties. Detangling myself from that intricate, suffocating web wasn't easy, wasn't instantaneous. At first, old habits died hard. I'd catch myself wanting to ask how her day was, to offer a sympathetic ear when she looked overwhelmed, to instinctively step in and help when she seemed to be struggling. But I stopped myself, each and every time, a conscious act of will, a deliberate severing of old patterns. She'd made it abundantly clear that she didn't want my involvement, didn't need my support, didn't value my concern, and I, finally, was no longer willing to offer it, to expend emotional energy on a black hole of indifference. There were moments, fleeting whispers of doubt, when I wondered if I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. If maybe, just maybe, I should soften, extend an olive branch, give her one more chance, one last opportunity to salvage something from the wreckage of us. But then, the memories would flood back, unbidden, relentless. All the times I'd put her first, sacrificed my own needs, swallowed my own desires, and been met with nothing but indifference, entitlement, and ultimately, rejection. This wasn't about revenge, wasn't about punishment, wasn't about inflicting pain. It was about something far more fundamental, far more vital. Self-respect. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was trying desperately to heal myself, to stitch together the tattered remnants of my own soul. The more distance I created, the more space I carved out for myself, the more starkly I realized the staggering extent of what I'd lost in our marriage, the profound and irreparable damage to my own sense of self. Not just time, not just effort, not just dreams deferred, but actual tangible pieces of who I was, who I could have been, chipped away, eroded by years of selflessness, of subservience, of silent sacrifice. I started revisiting old hobbies, dusting off my neglected guitar, picking up books I'd been meaning to read for years, books that had gathered dust on shelves while I'd been too busy being a good husband. I reached out to friends I hadn't seen in far too long, friends who reminded me of a time before us, a time when I was whole, when I was myself. It felt strange at first, almost selfish, to focus on myself, to prioritize my own needs, my own desires, my own healing. But it was also undeniably necessary, essential, life-saving. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for someone else, wasn't defined by someone else's happiness, someone else's expectations. I was living for myself, and the unfamiliar sensation, initially unsettling, slowly began to feel liberating. She noticed the changes, of course. Her expressions grew tighter, her demeanor even more reserved, her eyes holding a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Resentment, confusion, regret. She tried, in small, almost imperceptible ways, to re-establish the old dynamic, to slip back into the familiar patterns of us. Casual comments, shared jokes, small tentative gestures meant to test the waters, to gauge my reaction, to see if the old David, the compliant, accommodating David, was still lurking beneath the surface. But I didn't engage. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but simply because I couldn't go back to that version of myself. I wouldn't. I couldn't unlearn what I'd learned, couldn't unsee what I'd finally seen. When the last box was packed, the last vestiges of her removed from the apartment, and the space finally, truly, undeniably felt like mine again, a strange, unfamiliar sense of peace settled over me, quiet and profound. It wasn't the triumphant cinematic peace you see in movies, with victorious music swelling in the background. It was quieter, humbler, more internal, like exhaling after holding your breath for an impossibly long time. I didn't feel victorious, didn't feel celebratory. I felt free. She didn't leave immediately. For a while, she lingered in the background, a shadowy presence in the periphery of my newly reclaimed life, as though testing the permanence of the changes I'd wrought, probing for a weakness, hoping for a crack to show in my resolve. I could feel her watching me, assessing me, her presence more of a ghost than a partner, more of an observer than a participant in my life. She was waiting, perhaps, hoping for a sign, a signal that the old David was still there, waiting to be rescued, waiting to be chosen again. But there was none. I wasn't playing games, wasn't engaging in some elaborate power play. I wasn't holding out for her to have some sudden epiphany, to wake up one day and magically choose me, to realize the enormity of what she was about to lose. I'd stopped waiting for her the moment I started choosing myself. Eventually, inevitably, she tried to reconnect in earnest, to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us, a chasm she had, unwittingly or not, created herself. One evening, as I was sorting through the last remnants of our shared past, the final boxes of forgotten memories, she approached me, hesitant, tentative, but with a newfound air of determination. "Can we talk, David?" she asked, her voice softer, more vulnerable than it had been in months. I glanced up briefly, but didn't stop what I was doing, didn't offer any immediate encouragement. "About what, Lisa?" She hesitated, shifted her weight from one foot to the other, then took a deep, steadying breath. "About us. About everything that's happened. I know. I know I haven't been fair to you. I know I've made mistakes. But I think we can fix this, David. I think we can still fix this. I'm willing to try, if you are." For a long moment, I let her words hang in the air, suspended between us, heavy with unspoken regrets and unfulfilled promises. They sounded genuine, perhaps even sincere, tinged with a hint of desperation, but they felt hollow. Not because she didn't mean them, not because she was deliberately being manipulative, but because they were, undeniably, irrevocably, too late. The moment for fixing us had passed, had vanished into the rear-view mirror of our shattered relationship. I set the faded photographs in my hands aside, carefully, deliberately, and turned to face her, meeting her gaze directly, unflinchingly. "I appreciate you saying that, Lisa," I said, keeping my tone calm, measured, devoid of any lingering emotion. "But this isn't about fixing anything anymore. Not for me. I spent years, too many years, trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix, trying to carry the weight of both of us, trying to prop up a marriage that was crumbling from the inside out. And in the process, I lost too much of myself. I can't go back to that, Lisa. I won't." Her expression faltered, the fragile hope flickering in her eyes, dimming, dying. But I'm willing to change," she insisted, her voice trembling, a desperate plea clinging to the edges of her words. "I can do better, David. We can be better. Please." I shook my head slowly, gently, but with unwavering finality. "You had the chance to change, Lisa. You had countless chances. I gave you every opportunity, more chances than I probably should have, and you made your choice. Now, I'm making mine." Her eyes welled with tears, the raw, unadulterated grief of loss finally breaking through the carefully constructed walls of her self-absorption. But I didn't flinch, didn't soften, didn't offer any words of comfort. I'd cried enough tears for both of us, over all those wasted years, all those unspoken hurts, all those silent sacrifices. I wasn't angry at her anymore, not really. Nor was I resentful or bitter or consumed by hatred. If anything, I felt a strange, detached tinge of sadness, not for the end of our marriage, not for the loss of us, but for how long it had taken me to see things clearly, to recognize the truth of our unbalanced equation, to finally, definitively, choose myself. That night she packed a bag, a small worn suitcase filled with the last remnants of her life in our apartment, in my life. And then she left. Without another word, without a dramatic farewell, without a lingering moment of regret or a backward glance. Just the quiet click of the door closing behind her, the sound echoing through the suddenly spacious, suddenly silent apartment. And with that simple, understated sound, it was finally, irrevocably done. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the silence in the apartment stopped feeling empty, stopped feeling like a void to be filled. It became something else entirely, something unexpected, something restorative. Peace. I filled the space she'd left behind, the emotional vacuum she'd created, with things that mattered to me, things that nourished my soul, things that reminded me of who I used to be, who I was finally, painstakingly, becoming again. I surrounded myself with friends who saw me, truly saw me, friends who reminded me of laughter, of joy, of life lived fully, authentically, without apology. It wasn't an instant transformation, not a Hollywood makeover montage of self-discovery and triumphant music. It was a slow, gradual process, a quiet unfolding, a gentle reawakening. But every day, I felt a little stronger, a little more grounded, a little more myself. Life moved on, as it always does, relentless, unforgiving, but also, ultimately, redemptive. And so did I. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, wasn't just going through the motions, wasn't just playing a role. For the first time in years, I was living, truly, vibrantly, unapologetically living.